And so our first talk is on ZK login. And yeah, welcome. Yeah, Tini and Deepak are going to give the talk. Floor is yours.
All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you, Dan, for the introduction, and thank you, everyone, for making it to the very last session of RWC. So today we're going to present ZK Login, which is a novel method for authenticating users in Web3. I'm going to do the presentation jointly with Deepak, and this is work that was developed at Mysten Labs, which is the cryptography research team behind the Sui blockchain. And just to get your attention from the very first slide, let me tell you that ZK Login is one of the very few examples that has actually successfully deployed ZK proofs in practice. And right now, as part of ZK Login, we have roughly 10,000 ZK proofs daily. So if the clicker works, good, all right. So let me start with some motivation about why do we need a new method for Web3 authentication. And let me tell you that right now, we have roughly 500 million Web3 accounts. So if we try to contrast that with the number of accounts that we have in the traditional Web2, we're going to see that there is a very large gap. So in Web2, we have several billions of user accounts. So there might be many reasons for this big difference in the numbers. Maybe not every Web2 user wants to have a Web3 account as well. But one of the reasons that we see such a big difference here is that actually creating an account in Web3, onboarding in Web3 is quite different. And it can be quite challenging, especially for users who are not technical. So let me walk you through a little bit of how onboarding looks like in Web3. How does it look like if you want to create a blockchain account? And we're gonna focus in this talk in accounts that are non-custodial. So basically in accounts that do not place trust into a third party for handling their keys. So when you're trying to create a Web3 account, one of the most common approaches is to start by downloading some sort of browser extension. One of the most popular ones are MetaMask. And this application is going to help you to create your cryptographic keys, a pair of secret and public key. And it will also help you to create a mechanism in order to remember these keys, because remember that in the blockchain space, forgetting your secret key literally means that you're going to lose your assets. So if you try to play with MetaMask and create a Web3 account, it's going to ask you to create this secret phrase that consists of 12 words, and you need to write this somewhere down because this is your only mechanism to recover your funds if you lose your key. And it's going to ask you to repeat this, and only after doing this whole process, you can actually start doing transactions and signing using your cryptographic keys. So this process looks very, very different from the typical Web2 account opening, and for many users, it can be rather frustrating. So what we want to claim is that mnemonics and keys are actually not going to get Web3 into mass adoption. And ideally, we would like to have a way to create accounts in Web3 that looks pretty similar to account creation in Web2. As a matter of fact, a very common approach the last years in account handling in Web2 is to not even create new accounts for every single service that you want to use, and instead reuse your existing long-time accounts with Google, Facebook, GitHub, and so on in order to authenticate and log in other services. So the goal here is to do exactly the same for blockchain accounts. So the end product, as I said, is ZK Login. And the goal of this end product is exactly this, to make onboarding very, very easy. And ZK Login has been actually, as I said before, implemented and deployed in the Sui blockchain. And this is how the SUI ZK login wallet looks like. So the idea here is that the user can just log in using an existing, let's say, Google account, and the process looks very, very easy. They can just pick their existing Google email address and access their funds and do transactions this way, which looks, much more familiar to the average user. So let's get a little bit more technical. Let's see how we actually can create a service like this. So ZK Login is going to combine OAuth tokens with zero-knowledge proofs with the goal to create an authentication mechanism for Web3. As I said before, our focus is to not rely on any third parties, so the solution is non-custodial. We want to have a very user-friendly experience, so it should be very, very easy from the point of view of the user. And because now there's no third party and everything is going to go on blockchain for verification, we also need to be mindful about the privacy of the users. So in order to explain how ZK Login works, let me briefly remind you how OAuth tokens look like. And in particular, for ZK Login, we're going to use a popular extension of OAuth 2, which is the OpenID Connect. And the part of OpenID that is very useful for us is the fact that there is this ID token, which is a signed token that includes attributes over the user, for the user. So if we take a closer look at how such an ID token looks like, and if we just look at the decoded part, we can see that it consists of three parts: the header, the payload, and the signature. Most of the signatures in this token are actually RSA signatures, but the standard can also support ECDSA signatures. And the payload is the part that it's really the most important part for us. So this, and I should say that this ID token is basically a GWT token. So if we take a closer look at a particular example of a JWT token issued by Google, and we focus on the payload, we're going to see that there are various attributes here that are going to be particularly useful for the design of ZK Login. We see that there is an ISS field, which basically denotes who is the issuer of this token. We're going to see that there is this audience, AUD field, that denotes who is the intended recipient for this token, who is the intended content for this token. And we're going to see that there is this subject field, which is basically some sort of unique information about the user. What is even more important, though, is that there is this field that's called the nonce. And this is actually a field that allows the user to whom the token will be issued to import, to embed some information of its choice. So having said that, let me pass the torch to Deepak to explain how these nonce can be particularly useful for the creation of ZK Login.
Thanks, Fothini. I'll take you here for the rest of the talk. So let's get into the technical meat of our work. Right, so really the crux of the challenge is, how do we take this JWT looking like thing and somehow authorize blockchain transactions with it? And as Fothini kind of hinted at, the key trick really is to use this nonce in a way to allow us to do this transaction authorization. So in particular, what we do is to embed freshly created, so we first create a fresh key pair. I call that the ephemeral key, and we embed the ephemeral public key into the nonce field of the JWT. So this is all happening on the user end. So the user just creates a key pair, inserts the public key, and sends the token. So it sends the request to Google or whichever OpenID provider the user is using. And at the end of the OpenID Connect or OAuth flow, the user has a token with a signature of the OpenID provider over the whole token. And in particular, note that what we've essentially kind of done is got a certificate over the ephemeral public key from the OpenID provider. And we're going to use this certificate later to kind of authorize transactions. In particular, what we're going to do is take the corresponding private key and use that to sign transactions. So that is how, at a high level, we're going to authorize transactions. A second challenge is to identify the user in a way that is privacy preserving. What do I mean by that? As you might know, blockchains, in particular Sui, the blockchain we're building this for, has completely public information. So whatever transaction information you post on chain is just completely public. Now, a user presumably is going to return across sessions, and we need a way to identify the user across sessions. Now, thankfully for us, there is a field, as Fothini said, the subject identifier, which is a unique identifier of the user. We could directly use that to identify the user, but we don't want to reveal something. So what we end up doing is introduce a randomizer called Salt, which is a secret the user generates at setup time. So when the user is onboarding to the wallet, they generate this. We generate this random value. This needs to be saved. Saving this is important because otherwise you kind of lose access to your account. And this salt is essentially what helps us unlink the blockchain address from the Web2 address that the user has. I want to also quickly note that we could here, in theory, be using other fields. Like if there was email in this JWT token, we could have derived user addresses from their emails. If there was some other field here that uniquely, again, identifies the user, we could use that. So this would, in theory, allow us to create email-based wallets or other identifier-based wallets pretty naturally. A key question is, well, who maintains this salt? As Fothini kind of alluded to, the premise for our work is to kind of make it easy for users to onboard to blockchain. So we don't want users to remember the salt and have the burden of doing that. But of course, that is definitely one option. So there's plenty of options in kind of who maintains the salt, but at a high level, the idea is someone kind of needs to remember it. Either the user does it, or we make it easy for the user to do it by doing some tricks on the device. Or there is a salt service which kind of manages the salts for the user on behalf of the user. And there's plenty of variation in how you can build such a salt service, from a simple salt service to an enclave-based one to an MPC-based one, and so on and so forth. zk-Login is broadly speaking compatible with any of these options. The server options are more, let's say, comfortable for the user. Lastly, we also need to, we actually do need to prove that this JWT token is somehow well-formed. And again, going back to the previous point I was making, you can't post the JWT directly on a chain because, again, everything is public and you don't want to reveal something as sensitive as this. So what we end up doing is to, leverage the power of ZK snarks for us. So we build a ZK snark that allows us to prove that a JWT is valid. In particular, what that means is verifying that the signature verifies with Google or whichever OpenID provider we use their public key, checking that the ephemeral public key is properly inserted, checking that the address derivation is done correctly. Note here that the public key, the Google's public key and the ephemeral public key are both public inputs. So these will then be used by the blockchain validators to make sure that this is sort of the right public key of the OpenID provider. The end-to-end system looks something like this. The user requests a JWT from the OpenID provider. The app front end this could, for example, be an extension or a mobile device gets the JWT. There is a salt and zero-knowledge proof generation, and finally, the transaction submission happens. At the end of the day, the zk-Login signature looks something like this. It sort of has two components to it. A zero-knowledge proof, which proves validity of the ephemeral public key, and the corresponding ephemeral private key signed transaction. I want you all to note critically here that this a single zero-knowledge proof could be used to generate multiple transactions, because you can keep the first part same and use the second part. As long as the ephemeral private key is there, you can continue to sign different transactions, which is a key optimization. Last but not the least, we want to finish the proof generation fast. By fast, I mean it should finish in, let's say, 3 or 4 seconds so that the user doesn't experience this. For this reason, we went with Groth 16, also because it has small proofs, which is always nice, especially when you're posting the signature on chain. We want the signature sizes to be very small. Even though we use Groth 16, these proofs are fairly slow to generate on user devices, at least on many user devices. And so and so expecting users to kind of generate these proofs wasn't enough for us. So here we again we leverage a key trick. Basically, if you go back, there are two components to the signature. So even if the first part is delegated to a third-party service to generate the zero-knowledge proof for you, as long as the ephemeral private key is on the user device, the system is safe and secure. So that is what we kind of do. We delegate the proof generation to a third party, but keep the ephemeral private key on the user device. The circuit has about 1 million R1CS constraints. SHA-2 takes the dominant role in the costs. I won't go into the circuit details in the interest of time, but at a high level, we had to implement specialized parsing tricks so that we kind of don't parse the full JWT within the circuit and only selectively parse the relevant parts of it that we need. These are the end-to-end benchmarks of ZK login. A ZK login transaction takes about 3 seconds from start to finish, meaning to create the ephemeral key pair, get a zero-knowledge proof, produce a transaction, and actually submit. These transactions were submitted on the Sui blockchain. So this is sort of the end-to-end time. Again, I want to note that these numbers correspond to only the first transaction of a session. So if the ephemeral private key is remembered, then the user kind of doesn't face this every time they're signing a transaction. A few trade-offs I want to briefly highlight. As I've mentioned, there is a prover service that some providers can set up to run to kind of generate the zero-knowledge proofs. One downside of this option is that the prover service sees the JWT and is therefore able to link the user's Web2 and Web3 identities. Another worry we hear from some users is the fact that you'd be trusting someone like Google or Apple or whoever you use too much. One option people take in those cases is to kind of create a 2 out of 2 between Google and Apple, which is also possible. We can create like a multi-sig between Google and Apple with ZK login. Similarly, the Salt service also can see the link and can link the Web2 and Web3 identities. There are ways to mitigate this, which I can go into if you're interested. So as Fothini said, we've deployed this on Sui since about a year. As she has kind of already shown before, this is how it looks today. One thing I want you all to note here is when we click send here, real zero-knowledge proof generation is actually happening in the backend. So as you can see, it's not taking too much time, and the system actually works. So in production today, we have many OpenID providers, including Google, Facebook, Twitch, and Apple, and many others are also supported on DevNet. It's been about 1.5 years since we launched this on mainnet. We have generated over 7 million ZK login transactions. As I've noted before, a single zero-knowledge proof can be reused across transactions. So the number of unique zero-knowledge proofs is slightly lower at about 2.5 million. And these were again generated from about 500K ZK login addresses. So this has seen real traction for us. With that, I'll take questions. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. We have time for a few questions.
Yeah, so you put the zero-knowledge proof is generated by a separate server. Did you think about using zero-knowledge proofs which have EVMs which could run on the local device like Linkero, and you could then compress that into Groth16 with just doing the verification of that? So that would then remove that need for the server.
Yeah.
The server would only have to just compress the Groth16 if you
Yeah.
do that offline.
I think at least at the time we were doing this, that wasn't as popular an option. This has become a popular thing to do more recently. One concern with that would be if the end-to-end latencies are still good enough as what we have. If they are, then that would definitely be an option to consider.
Mutu was here. You should have asked him when he was here.
Hi, so I don't understand if you forward the token to the prover service, then the prover service can impersonate the user. So how do you prevent just impersonation from the token?
So the prover service doesn't have the ephemeral private key. So the prover service just sees the JWT, but the JWT just has the ephemeral public key in it, right? So it can't impersonate the user because it doesn't have the ephemeral private key, which is also needed to sign a transaction.
But I can generate my own private public key pair. I can also impersonate it towards other Google services that would accept Google tokens.
So if you create your own ephemeral key pair, you won't be able to get Google JWT signed over it, right? So the user's extension or whatever it is doing the key pair generation, embedding, and getting the signature from Google.
But what about presenting the token to some other service? Yes.
Sorry, I don't think I fully understand your
So you
question.
could forward the token to some other service to
Uh-huh.
pretend you are the user, and I'm wondering what you do against that.
So you can give the token to anyone you want as long as the ephemeral private key is stored safely on your extension or mobile.
Okay, let's discuss
So,
offline.
so
Thanks.
basically, if it helps, in order to sign a transaction, you need to do two actions. One is a zero knowledge proof over the token that you got from Google, let's say. And the second is actually a signature with the ephemeral secret key, the public key of which is embedded in the token that you got from Google.
So I
So
get
you
that.
cannot play with a different pair of keys because you need like both pieces.
No, I get that it's secure for your service, but I'm wondering about other services that might accept a token signed by Google for authentication for some other purpose.
So you're saying some other service could use this token? Yeah, indeed, that was one reason we were thinking of instantiating a prover service within an enclave. This is something we are considering doing, but we haven't done yet.
Thanks.